Okay, so very, very warm welcome to our evening. My name is Emma Rothwell. I am part of the education team with Surrey Wildlife Trust, and we have got the fantastic Hugh Warwick with us this evening. Very, very lucky to have him joining us. Hugh is the spokesperson for the British Hedgehog Preservation Society. Have I said it correctly, Hugh?
That's pretty much on there. Yep.
Excellent. He is an author and an ecologist. He's written 3 books already on hedgehogs. So hopefully we'll be able to grill him and he'll know all of his stuff for us this evening. As well as we were just having a little chat before, we've got a book on beavers coming out and otters and other wildlife. So very exciting to have him join us this evening. So huge big welcome to you, Hugh. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Emma.
And then just to let you know, everybody, that we will be, this is being recorded this evening as usual, and the recording will be available on our website probably tomorrow once it gets all uploaded. So you will be able to watch it again. And as normal, for those of you who are our regulars, then we will be using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. So I'm sure there will be some questions for Hugh throughout his presentation. So if you want to ask a question, pop it in the Q&A function, and I will keep monitoring that over the course of the evening. And then once Hugh finishes his presentation, we'll ask those questions live to Hugh at the end. If you have any other bits and pieces that you need to go into the chat function, if you have any sort of technical issues or anything else that you'd like to ask, I shall also monitor that. But if you could keep your questions to the Q&A session, that would be fantastic. So, and then I think that's about it. We'll have some, we'll sort of aim to sort of have some questions once Hugh has done his presentation. But just to start off with then, Hugh, the question was, have you seen a hedgehog in your garden this year? And we had 56% said no, but an amazing 44% said yes. So hopefully that's good news.
Well, hopefully. I mean, if we'd run this quiz, this poll 50 years ago, I think we'd have got a very different answer. I mean, that's the thing which is most troubling about this, is that this is sort of revealing. We think this is great. Maybe it's great, but actually it acts a bit like sort of shifting baselines. You look at this and go, well, 50%, nearly 50% of people are seeing hedgehogs in their gardens. So therefore we must strive to get 50% of people seeing hedgehogs in their gardens. When actually we should be striving for 95% of people to see hedgehogs in their gardens. We get lulled into thinking that our very degraded ecosystem is something which is to be sort of praised, but actually we need to be fighting against that degradation quite significantly.
For sure. Okay, well, I think we have got, we're filled up. We've got about 35 people present at the moment, Hugh. So I think if you're ready to start,
Yep.
We'll go for it. And then obviously I'll keep an eye on that and let anybody into the meeting who we need to. So I will unspotlight myself, put the spotlight all on you.
And I shall find my talk, as long as it's the correct talk and not the incorrect talk. Because the thing is, when you do loads of different sorts of talks, sometimes you can make a mistake. It'd be really awful. I mean, I get my sort of extremely rude, adult-oriented stand-up comedy. So anyway, so this one begins with what could be the opening line of a joke. Why did the hedgehog cross the road? And actually is it is a very serious question. Why did the hedgehog cross the road? Well, the answer is because our planning system is so focused away from benefiting nature that the hedgehog had no choice but to cross the road, because otherwise it was going to find itself constricted into too small a patch. Why did the hedgehog cross the road? Because our planning system sucks, is roughly the answer to that, not to show it had guts or whatever it would be. We begin with, I mean to go on, with politics and occasional bits of humour, hopefully. So this is a very precious photograph for me. In fact, one of your members, the lovely, wonderful Dr. Pat Morris, took this photograph many, many years ago, because I started studying hedgehogs, in fact, pre-days of working with Pat Morris, in fact, up in Orkney in the mid-1980s. And it's just gone on and on. When I started working on hedgehogs, most people would start as a student and be they'd start work on field mice, and then they'd move on to badgers and eventually focus their efforts on elephants. There'd be a sort of general move up the sort of taxonomic tree in terms of their sort of iconic status. And I started studying hedgehogs and then just, well, stayed studying. I had a brief year focused on pangolins, which was quite fun. That was back in the mid 1990s. But really, and again, that's another animal which rolls up into a ball when frightened and doesn't really bite. And yes, an insectivorous animal. I think there may be some sort of weird, strange thing going on there. But the reason I love this photograph, because I only got it from Pat relatively recently, was because my wife had recently taken a photograph of me sort of nowish. This is just pre-lockdown. And I'm amused at how little anything has changed in my life, even down to the color of top. So my life's been largely dedicated to working on hedgehogs with flurry, like the book on beavers I've just finished. I do write about other things too, but the central thing keeps coming back to this wonderful animal. And as such, it ended up with me writing so far. And I'm saying so far because I know that my wife isn't in this meeting and so won't hear this. I do have another book about hedgehogs I want to write, but I think she's despairing. So far, 3 books about hedgehogs. The first book, A Prickly Affair, was an accident. I wasn't planning on being an author, but it just happened. And I'm thrilled that it did. And it remains the only book which has ever been published to have endorsements on the cover from both Jeanette Winterson, I would argue one of our greatest writers, and Anne Widdecombe. And in fact, if you can think of anything else that both Jeanette Winterson and Anne Widdecombe agree upon, I will be quite surprised. I think it shows the great power of the hedgehog at bringing people together. My second book on the iconography of hedgehogs was endorsed by Robin, and most recently the Hedgehog book. I should say the titles of these books were not of my choosing. The iconography book is part of a series from Reaction, and they're all called Hedgehog or Rhinoceros or whatever. A Prickly Affair was supposed to be called The Hedgehog's Dilemma, but that's a rather large diversion into the work of Schopenhauer. If we want to talk about that, we can do later. And the Hedgehog book, again, part of a series. This book is so it was out at the end of last year, and if I was doing this talk in the real life, I would be doing it with a stack of books in front of me, which would be operating as a really subtle hint, almost a subliminal advertising thing, which would be going on whilst I talked. It would just be cropping. Every time you looked across at me, you'd be going, oh yes, I must think about buying his books. We don't have that opportunity because we're not here in person. So this is what's known as a really shameless plug. Please, if you are so moved, go to your local bookshop and get hold of my books, because it would make me very happy. And then drop me a line and I can send you if you send me a stamped addressed envelope, Emma will supply details. I can send you a book plate to go with it. And therefore, yes, that's the bit like me signing books for you at the end of a show. Advert pretty much finished for now. So as Emma said, I am spokesperson for the British Hedgehog Preservation Society. That's is a role which is, sometimes my life is quite quiet and I'm not bothered by anything, but every now and then there is a complete flurry. And the week before last was Hedgehog Awareness Week, as I'm sure you're well aware. And this is just 3 of the things I got up to on Hedgehog Awareness Week. A little bit of this morning with Philip and Holly, then with Robin Ince and Helen Chersky doing a fantastic part on the amazing Cosmic Shambles work that Robin Ince does, and then ending up with my appearance on the One Show, in which didn't tell them this, but I've never actually watched the One Show. It was a very strange experience because I ended up, they said, you'll get 5 minutes to talk about hedgehogs. And I'm standing outside the studio, and gradually I'm sort of seeing the clock tick down and tick down. And they're talking about yogurt and oats, and it's ridiculous and it's a waste of time. They're getting more and more frustrated. I ended up with 2 minutes. Lucky I can speak fast. Anyway, I also managed to make a joke. There's the person on the presenter has obviously, he has used a vast amount of Botox. And I introduced the concept of the hedgehog when it's threatened. The hedgehog, when it's threatened, the first thing it does is not roll into a ball, but the first thing it does is frown. And I said, well, go on, you frown. And he went, well, I can't do that, Botox. And I thought, well, you know, good on you, owning it. So yes, don't give hedgehogs Botox is also the lesson from this, but more on frowning hedgehogs later. So the question which often gets asked is why? Why bother with hedgehogs? Why spend all of your time working with hedgehogs? And it's because of this. And this is from ages ago now, but every time there's a vote or a poll for the nature icon or the national emblem or whatever, the hedgehog wins. And this may seem really trivial. Why should we worry about sort of these very unscientific polls? Because it gives us an opportunity of talking about really complex and important ecological issues without frightening the horses. It's an opportunity to begin a conversation about habitat fragmentation or agrochemical use, or about development planning policy, or our infrastructure, all of these things. We can start those conversations when we start talking about hedgehogs. If we were to rely upon other species which were not quite so universally adored, we would find obstacles, because people would find reasons to become a bit distracted, because actually some people don't like foxes, or they don't like badgers, or whatever. I should apologize for my movement. I'm using my wife's kneel seat, which is supposed to be very, very good for you. And I'm recognizing that it's really, really uncomfortable. So apologies. So yes, anyway, the hedgehog, it's important because it's a way into getting to talk about these bigger issues. But it's also important because the hedgehog itself has its own set of problems. Now, it's a bit disappointing right now to be talking about the State of Britain's Hedgehogs report, because I know that we have our employed ecological statisticians are currently crunching the data for the next iteration, which is coming out in September, October of this year. So I know there is new data coming. I'm relying now on the 2018 data. And what the 2018 data showed was that since the year 2000, which is when our regular systematic surveying really started, since the year 2000, urban hedgehog numbers were down by a third, well, 30%, and rural hedgehog populations were down by a half. Now that's just since the year 2000. We don't know how many hedgehogs there actually are. That people will talk in the press about figures of 30+ million hedgehogs in the 1950s. That is a guess. It's a guess. It's an extrapolation from a summer evening walk in Kew Gardens, and it may have been true. It may not be true, but it's not a statistically robust figure. The data that we are using to get the figures now is statistically robust. Slightly less robust. Mammal Society estimated that about a 2/3 decline nationally in hedgehogs since the mid-1990s. But that does fit into the sort of population decline that we're seeing. And I have given over the years hundreds and hundreds of talks to various groups around the country. Women's Institute, TANS, Women's Guild, gardening clubs, University of Third Age, Probus lunches, all of these sorts of groups, with an audience, and I can't see you, so I'm assuming you're all 35, but of a more mature audience, often retired audiences, which has given me this insight, this window of talking about what people are seeing. And that poll that you took at the beginning, that's really interesting. But what would that poll have been if I was asking you to consider your childhood? Were you regularly seeing hedgehogs in your garden then? And I would suggest probably most people were seeing more hedgehogs 20 years ago, 40 years ago. And it leads me to make a guess. And that is what it is. It's got no statistical robustness at all. But I feel we've probably lost between 90 and 95% of the hedgehogs in the UK since the end of the Second World War. And this is not ridiculous. If you look at population declines of I don't know, farmland birds or whatever, you see similar sorts of catastrophic declines. So this is significant. We've got this big population decline. I say the surveys we do are not based on actual numbers. They're based on change over time. So we have like the Mammals on Roads survey, which rather unfortunately monitors the numbers of mammals killed on the roads, including obviously hedgehogs, and living with mammals. Then we've got the BTO's amazing work as well. So we've got a number of different surveys, all of which we can then mash into the State of Britain's report, Hedgehogs report. Now, come the autumn, we will have the new figures, and I'm really, really, really excited. I really hope that we've seen a levelling off, a continued levelling off of the urban population decline, because that's what we saw in the 2018 report. Now, there is a risk of leaping into hyperbole, to over-egging the pudding. This was after our 2015 report, and Michaela Strachan, who I've had the pleasure of meeting a couple of times, is really great, but she's not a trained scientist, and she had written something for the Radio Times saying that, in fact, I realized I'm competing. What's the time? Gosh, if I finish before 8 o'clock, I can get back in for Springwatch. Anyway, so she'd written a piece for Radio Times saying that hedgehogs become extinct in 10 years, and it's got picked up by the press. And obviously this then kickstarts my phone ringing, because as a spokesperson for the Hedgehog Society. And I presumed that she had simply been misquoted, because this is the way of journalists. If you suggest to a journalist that the population, there'll be piecemeal extinctions in 10 years' time, there'll be localized extinctions in 10 years' time, they're going to lose the nuance. I've had this in the past. When I started to work on North Ronaldsay, the ornithologist who had estimated the population of hedgehogs up there had used, quite reasonably, as an ornithologist, used an order. It was between 1 and 10, 10 and 100, 100 and 1,000. And he said he thought there was over 1,000 hedgehogs. So he said, so between 1 and 10,000 hedgehogs. Obviously, the Daily Express carried the headline, 10,000 hedgehogs on the island. So there is a problem with journalists not listening to people and not taking things precisely enough. I did a lot of phone calls, and by the end of the day, I was beginning to get a little bit frustrated. However, I would like now to show you evidence of at least one journalist who quotes you precisely. Needless to say, I never had a Christmas card from Michaela Strachan. And also interesting, we've got this hedgehog, which is the hedgehog that the Independent has used regularly, this particular picture. And I find it useful, because it's a hedgehog showing three concerning things. One, is out in daytime, and on the whole, hedgehogs out in daytime are probably suffering from something not being quite right. Two, is covered in ticks. You can see above its right eye, below its right eye. In fact, below its right eye might even be fly strike, which would be even worse. And the final part is simply, it looks peaky. Anybody who's had anything to do with an animal will know this is a peaky animal. This is the sort of hedgehog which needs to be carefully and quietly picked up, put into a box, with something for it to roll up in, like an old towel that you're happy to wash at a high temperature. Put it somewhere warm, maybe even make a hot water bottle for it. You can do that with a drinks bottle and filled with warm water. Give it some food, jam jar lids of meaty pet food and one of water, and make sure there's a lid on the box, because even if they're a bit poorly, they'll sometimes scrabble, and then they will hide in the one place you can't get them. It's a known fact, hedgehogs are like that. And because they're covered in prickles, if they've pushed their way underneath something, you can't then pull them out, because the prickles are all stopping them doing that. You have to move things. In fact, Pat Morris told me that his one time in a radio studio, they'd wanted him to bring in a hedgehog, and the hedgehog had sort of jumped off the presenter's lap, because the presenter wanted to hold the hedgehog, and then hid underneath or behind an enormous piece of recording equipment, which then needed to be dismantled to get the hedgehog out. So yeah, don't do that. And then what you do is you get in touch with the British Hedgehog Preservation Society. I don't have the number to hand. Their website is very easy to find. And that means that you will get a phone number, and 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If there's nobody in the office, you get an answer phone, which basically begins a phone tree, and you'll end up finding your local and nearest hedgehog rescue. Better still, actually, just find out your local hedgehog rescue now and have it as a number you keep by the phone, so that you can then step in and get the hedgehog to somewhere safe. So why are hedgehog numbers suffering so dramatically? The rural hedgehog population decline is extremely dramatic, and if you look at, as I mentioned, the farmland bird surveys that the BTO has done, they're suffering similar sorts of things. You look at the decline in reptiles, if you look at the decline in bats, if you look at the decline in amphibians, you all have these similar things. And there's been plenty of work done recently looking at macroinvertebrate population decline as well. There's been enormous declines in invertebrate life out there. And there's a very good reason for that. To create a field of oilseed rape like this, Professor Dave Goulson did a really interesting analysis of data of the applications of biocide, all sorts of biocide, fungicides and herbicides and insecticides to industrial agricultural crops. And it's on average 17 different applications per crop across the country in industrial agriculture. And this is being done. I mean, this isn't farmer bashing. This is being done because the farmer needs to make a profit. And to do that, they need to remove competition. It's just unfortunate the competition ends up being hedgehog food and bat food and toad food and bird food, everything else. So a field of oilseed rape is going to be habitat lost for hedgehogs. They can't use that space. Also, the bigger the fields, the better the returns. And this means you've ended up losing the hedgerows. And the name of the hedgehog is not a completely sort of whimsical thing. It's based on the fact that they hog the hedges. You know, they're an edge specialist. And if you don't have a hedge, if you don't have an edge feature, and you've got a habitat which is essentially an ecological desert, not only do you lose that habitat, but you also fragment the landscape at a wider scale because there are fewer avenues for the hedgehog to move through that landscape. It's impossible to have a serious conversation about hedgehogs in the countryside without mentioning badgers. Now, this does cause a degree of consternation for some people because you'll notice maybe that there are two different sorts of people when it comes to badgers. And there are those that know that badgers can do no wrong, and that in the pantheon that of all that is good, they come somewhere very close to Lady Di and Mother Teresa. And there are those who know with equal certainty that the four horsemen of the apocalypse had a pet badger, that the badger is responsible for everything from COVID to climate change to Brexit. So, and this is where I apologize in advance, it's not a black and white issue. Sorry about that, but it is. I can see Emma groaning. You see, I can't see the rest of you. So it's not a black and white issue. It's ecology. Ecology is never simple and straightforward like that. It's a complicated ecological system. However, when I gave a talk at the Badger Trust conference a few years ago, as I went up onto the stage, Dominic Dyer, who was the boss of the CEO at the time, sort of in a stage whisper said, "I've propped the emergency exit open for you so you can make a quicker getaway." Because I was about to tell the badger lovers that badgers do and will eat hedgehogs. And in fact, it's more than that. Badgers have a population level impact on hedgehogs. But, and this is where the but comes in, it's ecologically illiterate to slip into the knee-jerk reaction of some great and very, very robust commentators on the countryside, like Robin Page. And these are the sorts of statements which get bandied around every time there's a discussion about hedgehogs in the countryside. And in fact, just yesterday, I was watching BBC Parliament because they were debating the Environment Bill. And we had, I've never thought I would be eagerly waiting to hear what Chris Grayling had to say, but I was, because he was speaking on behalf of hedgehogs and did say good things. The amendments didn't get passed, but there was another MP, a DUP MP, who stood up and said, well, basically, if you want to save hedgehogs, you just got to kill badgers. And this is not very sophisticated ecological thinking. Actually, badgers and hedgehogs have what's known as an asymmetric intraguild predatory relationship, which means that they operate within the same ecological guild, they eat the same food, they're principally competitors for macroinvertebrates. You know, the worms and the beetles and the other bugs and beasts, which are down there on the ground. But badgers have a number of advantages. Badgers can dig, whereas hedgehogs just scratch the surface. Badgers don't hibernate, which in some respects is an advantage because they're less vulnerable than that. Badgers also create a landscape of fear that they prevent hedgehogs moving through the landscape. An active badger set or latrine along a hedge line, when a hedgehog is leaving a rural refugia, as the villages are referred to in scientific papers, they will get as far as the badger set or latrine, turn around and come back again, often as not. So they've got this set of different problems. And our understanding, best understanding at the moment, is that when the ecosystem becomes degraded, when there is less in the way of macroinvertebrates out there, that badgers will, well, that the balance shifts from being one of competition to one of predation. And for those who deny the ability of a badger to eat an adult hedgehog, I think I'm right in saying I'm the only person who can say that they have, in horror, watched their little Willy being eaten by a badger. What that also taught me was to name my hedgehogs maybe a bit more seriously when I'm studying them. It's a real fact that badgers do have an impact on hedgehogs. However, badgers and hedgehogs have coexisted absolutely fine since the retreat of the last ice sheet, and we're here in previous interglacial as well. We know that they can and do coexist, but something has changed. And what's changed is what we've been doing to the wider ecosystem. I'm not referencing this this talk, but I do, if you're interested, this paper in Scientific Reports, part of Nature family, is really useful. It's been funded by the people I work with and is something which just unpicks the impact that badgers do have. However, apportioning blame is, well, that's something to leave for members of the DUP and for Robin Page and his ilk. It's not something which we really need to do. We need to solve the problem, work out how to get our ecosystem back to the level of functioning form that it was in, so that both species can coexist. Now, obviously, the stereotypical image of the hedgehog for many years has been squashed on the roads. And there is a very good reason why we're seeing fewer hedgehogs squashed on the roads. And that's not because the hedgehogs are getting any cleverer. It's because there are fewer hedgehogs. The Mammals on Roads survey based the hedgehog data on that has been shown that it's a very clear representation of populations in the wider environment. And the fewer hedgehogs you get, the fewer hedgehogs there are. This is on a certain category of roads. On busy motorways, hedgehogs actually tend to avoid, so they don't get squashed on there so often because they're so noisy. But there is an additional problem with hedgehogs being killed on the roads. And at the moment, we estimate up to 100,000 hedgehogs may be killed on the roads each year, out of population possibly of 500,000. So 20% each year killed by cars. I mean, obviously that's a spring population, 500,000, and there's recruitment of young. But the additional problem is these concrete barriers. So this is around Oxford Ring Road, and it's was put there after a horrible car crash, and it's turned what was something difficult for hedgehogs to cross at night into something that is physically impossible for them to cross at night. And this means that we are not only having hedgehogs killed on the roads, but we are further fragmenting the landscape, chopping it up into small pieces. Now, this fragmentation can come in many forms. This is Boundary Brook, which is 50 meters behind me. And it was canalized in the early 1980s to stop the flood problems on our street, which was a fantastic idea if only Thames Water would actually do what they're supposed to do and stop the flooding happening. Fed up of sewage in my neighbour's garden, leaving that to one side. This is a pitfall trap. It's an absolutely perfect way of catching hedgehogs and other small mammals. There is no way a hedgehog can escape from this. It will die. I've rescued 4 from there in the last 20 years. I don't often walk past there during daylight. So this is another way that we fragment the landscape. Yes, there's a footbridge up ahead. That's a very dog-used footbridge. It will be off-putting to hedgehogs, but obviously they will use it to some extent. It's not a complete barrier, but behind well, in front of the hedgehog, I should say, 100 meters that way is a busy road, and 100 meters in the other direction is another busy road. There is not a lot of way through the landscape. And the reason why fragmentation is so significant is when you begin to look at how far hedgehogs will travel. And Surrey Wildlife Trust member Nigel Reeve did this work many years ago, a Surrey golf course, an 18-hole golf course. One male hedgehog played an entire round over 12 nights. That's nearly 30 hectares. And what he found was that the home range of male hedgehogs was about 30 hectares, female hedgehogs 10 hectares, that male hedgehogs would walk 2 kilometers a night, female hedgehogs 1 kilometer a night on average. Now that's individuals. But if you want a viable population, now this is an important sort of measure of things, the viable population. What is the minimum viable population requirements? So we got a very clever statistician zoologist called Tom Morehouse at Oxford to crunch the numbers for us on this. What you've got to consider is an island. Imagine an island out in the middle of the ocean, and it's an absolutely the most perfect hedgehog-friendly island. It's enormous, and it's got one male hedgehog in the middle of the island. That clearly isn't a viable population. And if you've got a small island, which is a desert island with no food and 1 million hedgehogs, that is not a viable population. You can begin to take those two extremes and work out where is the minimum requirements for a viable population. And what Tom found was that in the best possible habitat, which a Surrey golf course like this is not far off, you need a starting population of 32 hedgehogs, and you need about 90 hectares of unfragmented landscape in suburbia. In the rural landscape, this is far worse. You need 4 or 5 square kilometers. So 1 square kilometer of unfragmented landscape in suburbia, 3 18-hole golf courses. Where are we going to find that? Without a canal or a really busy road or a new development with impenetrable fencing. Where are we going to find that sort of space? And that's the problem that hedgehogs are facing in our urban landscape, that they may have areas which are fantastic for them, but they're too small to support a viable population. And this is exemplified a bit here. This is some absolutely brilliant data collected from a survey in Brighton. And if you look at the dots, this is GPS tags on the back of hedgehogs. Things have moved on since my radio tracking days now. This is brilliant. If you look at especially the red dots, you can see the key. The male hedgehogs just moved so much further than the female ones. 8 p.m, here they go, they start. So this is mid-May, so it's not far off this time of year. And you can see daytime hedgehogs are pretty much static. Then 8 o'clock, off they go again. And they're moving considerable distances. You can see from the map, this housing estate, how many gardens that these hedgehogs will need to use. The females are concentrating on feeding at this time of year. The males are concentrating on finding females, as that's the reason why they move so much further. And this collection of data is absolutely vital, I think, in informing people about the needs that hedgehogs have. And it's at the heart of why we launched the campaign Hedgehog Street, the collaboration between the People's Trust for Endangered Species and the Hedgehog Society. And it's our 10th birthday this year. And it's one of those things where we could have both been working on hedgehogs independently, almost competing for resources. But we actually decided to work together, and it's been extremely valuable to do this. Lots and lots of work has been achieved through it. So the Hedgehog Street campaign, you can join up as a hedgehog champion. It's all free. You get loads of information about how to help hedgehogs. Obviously, you can join the British Hedgehog Preservation Society too. They love that as well. But it's a really useful sort of way of sharing knowledge and experiences. And at the heart of it is simply overcoming those barriers. And to begin with, it's about overcoming those barriers in suburbia. And when you've got a wall like this, it's hard work. I borrowed drill. It's terrifying. Actually, I'm not very good at power tools, but it took an hour of hard drilling to get through that. And we always have a stunt hedgehog to take along with us. These things work, and they really do work. This one, Cherwell Boathouse in Oxford, this has to be the best of hedgehog holes. It's a much quicker hole to make. You get an angry hedgehog and a catapult, and then you fire it at the bottom. But obviously, what we're really looking for is getting as many holes made as possible. The labeling is useful just so that people know what they're there for. And you give your neighbours a plaque as well, and they have it on their side, and you get your neighbours to talk to their neighbours, and their neighbours talk to their neighbours, and you spread hedgehog love down the hedgehog street. And in fact, I'm very much in favour of the idea of 21st of June, if we're allowed to mingle properly, then we should be having street parties, obviously, but I think we should have hedgehog street parties. That'd be quite good. Now, there is one exemplar, the North Oxfordshire village of Kirklington. Now, I've been to Kirklington on many occasions, talking, doing lectures, and the Kirklington Wildlife and Conservation Society decided that they would really tackle the issue of fragmentation in their village by working out the minimum number of holes they would need to make to get the maximum coverage. And so they got a big map, and it's absolutely superb. You know, there would be one garden which was an absolutely pivotal garden, and they would lobby that household holder for a few weeks to gently offering homemade jams and chutneys and things, and eventually win them over so that they could go in and create these fantastic this fantastic variety. It's on the foothills of the Cotswolds, so it's very stony around there. And I'm so impressed with it. But my friend Chris, who's the motivator behind this, his garden is about 2.5 feet lower than his neighbours. So I asked him what he was going to do about that. And he said, sort of jokingly, I thought he was going to build a staircase. So he did. And so, yeah, that's all very well and good, quite funny, looks great. First night it was opened, a hedgehog came through the hole at the top, and he had a trail camera on it. I like to think that it stops at the top, admiring the scene before sashaying down the staircase. He had baited it with food beforehand, so the hedgehogs were being drawn to it. But it shows these things really do work. Now, I went to photograph him a few months ago to illustrate an article I was writing, and he said, "You've got to come and see what I've done now." And it was like, what's this? And one of his neighbours has got an even bigger difference in height between gardens. And oh, sorry, the video. I forgot to show you the video, that it actually works. You can take my word that it works, but actually here is the steps in action. Watch this video closely, because you'll see not only can hedgehogs go up it forwards, they can also go up it backwards. And if you watch closely, you might also notice a design flaw. Now, no hedgehogs were hurt in that filming, because hedgehog spines, which are made of the same stuff our hair and our fingernails are made of, they are embedded into the skin at a slight curve with a sort of wasp pinched waist, as it were, and so that they flex when they hit the ground, so that the hedgehog wouldn't be hurt. I've asked him to install a banister just to avoid any more embarrassments. So sorry, I was getting carried away with myself because of the next thing he showed me, which is this. And this is obviously ridiculous, and you sort of get the feeling that he's creating a sort of set for real life Sonic the Hedgehog. But again, evidence is here. It works. So build it and they will come. You know, make the holes, make the connections between gardens, and this is something which is really valuable. Now, it's hard work making those holes. So wouldn't it be better if you could just replace, you know, the gravel boards with ones with holes cut already, which is a great thing. Fencing suppliers are beginning to get there. But I have a bigger plan. It's actually over 2.5 years ago now. Change.org got in touch with me, and they asked me if I wanted to do a petition based on hedgehogs, trying to return hedgehogs to their former glory. And Emma, would you be able to put in that URL, change.org/save our hedgehogs, in the chat, just so that people could maybe click on it and maybe sign up when I tell them about it? Thank you so much. So the idea of returning hedgehogs to their former glory, for me, I thought this is absolutely marvelous. So they said, what question would you like people to, what would you like to call for? And so I thought it's simple. We should call for a dismantling of industrial capitalism and the replacing of it with something nicer. And they said no to that. So we sort of went back and forth a bit. And in the end, I was almost embarrassed by the smallness of the ask. But I needn't have been bothered, because it's proved to be really quite eventful. They pointed out to me that one of the advantages of a petition with a relatively simple ask, which in this case is calling for the planning law to be changed so that all new housing developments come with hedgehog highways built in place. Now, again, I'm not here justifying any development. You know, the developments need to stand on their own 2 feet, as it were, and I will still sit in front of bulldozers if I need to. But if they're being built, then let's make sure they have the hedgehog highways. It's a small ask, a change to the national planning policy framework. And everybody who signs up to the petition gets my updates. And I thought, well, that's fun, but hadn't quite realized that when you get to 10,000 signatures, that's 10,000 people getting your updates. And when you get to 100,000 people, that's a lot. And then when you get to 500,000 people signing up to the petition, you end up having a meeting with the Minister for Housing, and you get to meet the boss of one of the biggest developers in the country. And then at around that time, July 2019, just at that point when you thought that things weren't going to get any worse, and ministers were being shuffled around as Johnson moves in, we got a change in the National Planning Policy Framework. It was announced by James Brokenshire that they were going to have guidance notes now to include hedgehog highways. Now, this is so exciting, but the word guidance is significant. It's only guidance, there are no teeth. And what it relies upon now are the local planning authorities actually then stipulating that developers must include hedgehog highways, but there is no obligation on them to do this. This is why the petition stays open. This is why I'm pushing for the next milestone, because next milestone is coming very soon, because we're at over 984,000 signatures, which is very exciting. We'll get to 1 million, hopefully, when all of you have signed, we'll be closer. But when we get to 1 million, this just gives that sort of psychological weight to the petition. It gives us this leverage to go back and demand a more robust change to planning law, so it becomes a stipulation rather than just guidance. And this is one of my updates from April, and the BBC Wildlife magazine I'd written a feature for, and I was described by Tom Holland as the Lorax of hedgehogs, which for those of you who know the children's story by Dr. Seuss will appreciate the enormity of that comment. However, what you've also got to recognize is the impact this had on my daughter, who has adored Tom Holland for many, many years. Unfortunately, the Tom Holland who likes my work is the historian Tom Holland, who has a Radio 4 program and is a very fine gentleman, not the rather good-looking young bloke who plays Spider-Man. So my daughter now remains unimpressed and rather disappointed. However, yeah, we're still pushing towards 1 million signatures. So please, and the big thing is, if you're moved to sign it, then that's great. But please tell everybody you know. It makes a really big difference to get that sort of word of mouth spread. Thank you. And if you're further interested in this sort of world, the communications on the petition site are rather clunky. In fact, very difficult for me to communicate with people, especially when so many people are commenting on each article. So I set up a Facebook group called Hedgehog Highways, and it's the Hedgehog Highways Facebook group. It's about to get 18,000 members now, and it's a very busy group. Thank you very much to my 2 wonderful moderators who stopped me going mad, because who knew people on the internet could be quite so strange, but they can be. My moderators help mop up the mess. But it's a wonderful place if you want to ask questions about how to make holes in fences or overcome certain barriers or all these sorts of things. People there will be able to answer your questions. So just as I come to wrap up, because I've been burbling for a while already, a few things to do in your gardens. Now, stereotypically, I suppose Surrey is a place I would expect to have people with ornamental ponds, but I'm hoping none of you do. But if you do have an ornamental pond, please turn it more into a wildlife pond by either creating a beach at one end or a bunch of rocks at one end, or putting in a ramp, because hedgehogs can swim, but just not forever. And if they can't get out, then they will simply drown. And I've had some really sad stories from people who've discovered this the hard way, and found hedgehogs have drowned in their pond. Obviously, none of you are going to drop litter. This is a picture which I use in primary schools, but I normally have a warning sign beforehand, and I point out this hedgehog is under anaesthetic. It genuinely is under anaesthetic. It was rescued, rehabilitated and released into the wild. But even just dropping elastic bands can have a massive impact. We've been running a campaign directed at the post office now for years, and they still have no injunction against the postal workers dropping elastic bands. It's estimated over 1 million a day are dropped around the country. It's a waste of resources. Yes, they do biodegrade, but it takes months and months and months for them to break into small pieces. That doesn't help a hedgehog, which has got one trapped around it. We've been running a campaign. We ran a campaign for 8 years against McDonald's, and we won. We got them to change the design of their McFlurry cup. You know, we do continue to press these things, and eventually people have to accept that hedgehog rights have got to be held value over the shape and the nozzle of your McFlurry cup. And maybe the post office will eventually stop doing this too. We have these posters and stickers available from the Hedgehog Society. Just stick one on your front door near the letterbox. Be great. Obviously, if you're going to be tidying up your garden, the question has to be, why are you tidying up your garden? Because you want a wild garden, a wildlife-friendly garden. And No Mow May is a great idea, but yeah, No Mow May and many other months too, maybe. But in particular, it's the borders. Remember, the hedgehog is an edge specialist. So if you've got a hedge, a fence with vegetation growing against it, that'll be where the hedgehogs are. So if you run in there with a strimmer, you will kill hedgehogs, or you will maim hedgehogs. And my social media feeds are often full of either pictures of people sending me pictures of hedgehog poo saying, is this all right? I go, well, yes. Or is this a hedgehog poo? If anyone's monitoring my social media feeds, if the algorithms of the social media companies are doing it, they must think I'm very strange. But then you also get a host of horrible images of injured hedgehogs too. And obviously bonfires. If you want to create the ultimate hedgehog house, yes, you can go and buy one, but best do it yourself. Get a big pile of dried vegetation, then surround that by some twigs, and then surround that with some bigger bits of wood, and then surround that by some large bits of wood. And obviously you're creating a bonfire, but for the hedgehog, that's just perfect nesting space. So every autumn I'm very busy doing talks, and the key messaging there is just don't build your bonfire until the day you're going to burn it. That way you won't, these animals won't take up nesting inside. And then if you're lucky, you'll end up with some of this in your garden, because in the end, hedgehog poo is one of the easiest ways of knowing whether you've got hedgehogs actually there. I mean, you can sit out at night, and as it's going to get warmer, maybe that is going to be the opportunity. I have been experimenting with various scents, because scent is the principal sense of the hedgehog. And I've been trying to lure hedgehogs into the garden because I haven't had hedgehogs in my garden for quite a long time. And so I find that actually, if you lie in a hammock wrapped up in a double duvet, and on a table beside you, well, most recently, last year, I was using a combination of juniper and quinine with some other botanicals, with a little bit of lemon. I found that was ineffective at bringing hedgehogs to my garden. So this year, I'm going to move from the peaty West Coast sort of smells of malt whiskies all the way through to the lighter Speysides, and just see if any of these will act as a lure to hedgehogs to my garden. It's an experiment which I'm undertaking on your behalf, and I'm willing to go through with the hard work that will be entailed. And then if you're really lucky, around now, you might see some of this. This is the hedgehog carousel, the mating, the courtship ritual of the hedgehogs. The female hedgehog is in the middle, and the male is circling her. The female hedgehog is frowning. You can see by the way the spines are brought forward over her nose and face. This is what that guy from the one show couldn't do. Whilst the female frowns, mating cannot take place. I'll leave that there with you for a moment. And this can go on for over an hour. And it's when the hedgehogs emerge from hibernation, they're normally all out by the beginning of April. The females come out slightly later than males, and the males are out earlier and they feed up a bit more, and then they go hunting for females. The females emerge from hibernation. They've done all the work of rearing the young. The male's involvement is the courtship, a quick how do you do, and then they're off. That's it. The female does all the work. So she is depleted of reserves, and she needs to feed. And this can be really, really irritating, I imagine. And in the end, the female needs to stop frowning. She needs to relax, the spines relax, and then mating can take place. And sometimes in the right vegetation, this can leave an amazing arena of flattened vegetation, which has led to what I think is quite possibly the best headline The Guardian has ever covered. Hedgehogs cleared of corn circle dementia. This is back in 1991. I still have that physical piece of paper. And the delight of it The cereologists, you may remember the cereologists, they're probably still cereologists out there. And if there are any in the audience, I'm very sorry. I mean, I'm not apologizing, I'm just very sorry for you. So the cereologists believe that the crop circles, which mysteriously appear near where people sit in pubs with pints of scrumpy and large planks of wood and ropes, mysteriously appear due to Earth energies rising or aliens coming down. They're not quite sure which it was. And so the conference they were having, keynote speaker was none other than the son of God himself at the time, that was David Icke. And somebody suggested at the conference that possibly some of these crop circles were made by circling hedgehogs. And I love the fact that somebody else at the conference applied some science to this and pointed out this would require around 40,000 hedgehogs working in synchrony to make even the more modest crop circles, and therefore it's much more likely to be little green men. Anyway, so here we go, just because this might be one of the questions that comes up. It often is. But what have hedgehogs ever done for us? Now, the anthropocentric view of conservation is one of the most irritating bits of my communicating life. I really get wound up by it. The idea of human exceptionalism is actually the reason why we have a biodiversity crisis and a climate crisis. We think we are so much better, so special, but actually everything has got a right to life, and we should really recognize and accept that. So what have hedgehogs ever done for us? Well, they're not like the bees, you know, we're not going to lose all our fruit if the hedgehogs disappear. They're not like a beaver, they're not going to be engineering our ecosystems for us. But they're important because they're a generalist, because they've been around in some form or other since the time of the dinosaurs. There's an argument going for that. So yeah, they've been around a long time, and we are having this massive impact on an animal which has outlived so many other species. But I also point out that they are the most important creature on the planet. I made this claim in the big, well, it's in my first book, but the big issue made that their cover. That's something I do like. I love it not only for my claim, but also if you look, Obama and me, Desmond Tutu speaks. I managed to marginalize two of the most important people on the planet. And that phrase, save the hedgehog, save the world. This is my favorite coffee mug. I got given it a couple of years ago in the Netherlands. And they translated my book into Dutch, which is great. And it's now become the slogan of the Mammal Society over there in the Netherlands, because they treasure it so much. So this is their merchandise now, features save the hedgehog, save the world. And this may sound like a ridiculous bit of hyperbole, but let me explain why I believe it's true. You go back to near the beginning of the talk, if you remember back to there. Yeah, the hedgehog is the nation's favorite animal. Now, hold that thought. Now, we've got Stephen Jay Gould, the amazing American writer. He coined a phrase. He said, "We will not fight to save what we do not love." Very simple, very simple. He's talking about conservation. We will not fight to save what we do not love. So how do we get people to fall in love with nature? We need people to fight for nature. Now, nature on its own is such a nebulous concept, so enormous. We kind of need to find a gatekeeper, a way in. And a lot of the conservation and wildlife groups understand that instinctively. And so they've run with the charismatic megafauna, you know, the elephants and the tigers, the whales and the dolphins. And to a point, this works. Now, if we go back, it's a rather grim thought, this, but me as a sort of teenager, I had 3 posters on my bedroom wall. I had a majestic tiger above my bed. I had a leaping humpback whale on the opposite wall. And above my desk, I had a picture of a young woman who'd been playing tennis and forgotten her underwear. Athena did well out of me. And it dawned on me really that I'm as likely to get nose to nose with the humpback whale as I am with the tennis girl. You know, these things aren't going to happen. I'm not going to be able to form that relationship that I really want. In the end, if I'm lucky, I'll fall in love with the girl or the boy next door. And the hedgehog is the animal equivalent. It's the one we've actually got a chance. It's not magic. There's no great woo there. It's not a crop circle thing. It's down to the simple fact that the hedgehog doesn't have a fight or flight response. That when you've rescued it from that ditch, this is another one of the hedgehogs I've rescued from that canalized ditch. When you've rescued it from the ditch and you place it down on the ground and you're quiet and you wait, it will unroll. And if you're lucky, you'll get a moment when it notices you. It's a sentient enough animal to notice you. It will recognize you. It will assess you. I've been out radio tracking hedgehogs, spent months in the company of hedgehogs. They've all got individual character. They're fascinating little beasts. Yes, they're very cute. But because they don't have the fight or flight response, because their defense is to roll up into a ball, you have the opportunity of getting close. Now, I'm not suggesting you go around molesting your hedgehogs and posing for photographs, but you do get an opportunity like you do with no other species. You know, all those birds on your bird feeder are to remove. You can throw bread at ducks in the park, that sort of thing. Yes, you can get close to snails and things, but they're not really that full of character. And you can watch beautiful wildlife, thanks to David Attenborough, thanks to Chris Packham, in just a few minutes' time on BBC Two. But again, it's at a remove. The hedgehog is special. It gives you an opportunity of getting nose to nose with an animal which is bigger than 99% of all animals that have ever lived on the planet. It's in the top 1% with the blue whale, Tyrannosaurus rex, and us. It's a truly amazingly evolved predator. And we can get close to it. And when you get close to it, and when you make eye contact with it, and you do this with one, there was one hedgehog called Nigel. It was a lovely night out. And we made eye contact. And it was a moment when I really felt that transition from just liking stuff to loving it. And when you start loving nature, that's when the fun starts. And the revolution too. So thank you very much for bearing with me. I'll stop the screen sharing thing now, and if Emma can come back into frame, we can see if anybody had any questions.
Wow. I felt quite emotional then when you were doing your little bit about the sentient hedgehog. I'm probably not the only one who's just shed a little tear. Wow, that was, Hugh, that was amazing. Brilliant. And I'm sure we've got quite a few comments coming in, a few questions coming in, just to so I'll get started on those. But yeah, that was just so brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. So we've had a couple of comments that came in the chat, so I'll read those first and then I'll move to the Q&A bits, if that's all right with you, Hugh.
Oh, I'm fine. Just ask away.
Okay, cool. All right. So one comment that came in from Elaine quite early on, she was saying that most of the hedgehogs brought into the wildlife aid are found out in daylight, looking peaky and covered with ticks, as you mentioned on your first picture. These are normally released back from where they came from after some fluid therapy. So I'm presuming Elaine must be part of the wildlife aid there. More distressing is the number of hogs brought in with strimmer wounds, which is what you where you talked about. So that's it's obviously something that's quite common. That the hedgehogs are coming into the wildlife aid for. So.
It's just a simple matter. I mean, I run day-long workshops and half-day-long workshops with land managers. I did one not that long ago with the Oxford Direct Services, for the people who actually do the mowing around all the parks and gardens and things around Oxford. And it's just talking to them about how you can do this safely. And it's just, it takes a bit more time, but you run just the blunt end of a rake and run it along the bottom of the hedge before you go in with a strimmer if you're going to do it. That's it.
That'll move the hedgehog on.
Well, you'll notice the hedgehogs there. You can move the hedgehog yourself.
Right.
Okay. You won't have hurt it. You'll have knocked into it, and you can just move it, and it will scare other wildlife ahead. But most wildlife will get up and move. It's just because of the lack of fight or flight response. The hedgehog's response is to frown and then curl up.
Yes. Okay, brilliant. Then we've just had another comment then from Jenny. Thank you for these comments, everybody. That we have several hedgehogs visiting our garden, and they often start to come out just before it gets dark. And then in capital letters for this, we have an evil magpie that I'm presuming that the magpie is not popular in this garden, that likes eating the hedgehog food. So if the hedgehogs come out just before it gets dark, it will peck them. Is there anything we can do to stop it other than camping out in the garden all evening? I can imagine that they've this little family with their little picket sign saying, "Go away, evil magpie."
Let's not get too down on magpies. The Songbird Survival Trust will be jumping up and down with glee and wanting to shoot them. So the thing about that is actually you just cover the food, and if you are accessing computers, obviously you're doing this, but look for online hedgehog feeding station. The simplest way of describing it is an upturned box. I haven't got anything to hand. An upturned box with a 13 centimeter holes, all you need for the hedgehog, in the bottom corner of it. And the simplest thing is you've got your upturned box and you put the food inside the box. The hedgehog comes in and gets the food. Now, first of all, you need to stop animals knocking the box over. So you put a brick on top of it. You need to stop cats reaching in and getting the food and pulling it out. So you put in a partition so that the hedgehog essentially goes into a tunnel and comes round to the food being back at the front wall of it. And this has the added advantage of deterring rats, because rats will find themselves in a corner, right in a corner. And so to linger there and eat will actually be disturbing for rats because of their tendency to neophobia. So so a feeding station is your solution to that problem. And that obviously stops the birds pecking at the food too.
Yes, for sure. No, yes, very good. Okay, so couple of then questions. I'm just moving over to the Q&A section for you. So Amanda has said that our hedgehog is an RSPCA rescue hedgehog and has a forever home in our garden. That's nice, isn't it? We have a lot of cameras around our garden and have seen she has very regular habits every night, but we haven't seen her since a fox jumped over the fence. It looks like a young fox and has popped back every couple of days. They haven't seen the hedgehog since. Is it possible that the fox might have killed her?
Okay, so living with mammals, one of the long-running citizen science surveys that the People's Trust run, has shown that the presence of foxes does not correlate with the absence of hedgehogs. So on the whole, the presence of foxes is not the end of the world. Badgers are a different matter. Foxes tend not to kill adult hedgehogs, but they will injure adult hedgehogs. And so there's been a lot of work. In fact, it's Nigel Reeve was doing the work in Regent's Park in London, and a lot of the hedgehogs there had got, when they'd been found and autopsied because they'd been run over on the road or something, they were found to have had healed, broken back legs. One or other of the back legs was broken, and that's probably because a hedgehog, sensing impending doom, as a fox might be, will frown before rolling into a ball, and it will leave a trailing leg sometimes, and that will be grabbed by the fox before it can roll up into a ball. I have seen video of young foxes killing young hedgehogs, basically playing with them to death, but they were young hedgehogs. I get sent really, really weird stuff sometimes over the internet. So yes, I mean, it depends how old that hedgehog was. Hedgehogs are mortal, unfortunately. So yes, it is possible it just naturally died. It's possible the presence of the fox has put it off, and unlikely, but it is possible that the fox might have done damage to the hedgehog.
Yeah, I suppose it's very difficult to say, isn't it? But yeah, and just sort of linked into that, Hugh, another question came through just now saying, what other animals predate hedgehogs? Are domestic cats any threat to them? Because this person is thinking of creating a hedgehog highway for their area, but many of the neighbours have cats, so would cats be a problem?
Well, cats are a problem, but not for hedgehogs. I mean, they're a problem because they massacre our garden birds. I'm particularly sensitive due to the robins that have been breeding in my garden. And last year I managed to tame one of the robins to feed from my hand, so I'm very attached.
Oh, cute.
Yes, and my neighbours know my feelings about cats. They will have words with them. I mean, I do actually quite like cats too, but I don't let them know that. So no, cats aren't really a problem. No, I mean, I imagine a malicious big bruiser might injure a baby hedgehog, but no, they're not a problem. Some dogs can be a problem, which is worth bearing in mind. But in terms of predators, no, I mean, the only predators in the UK apart from people are badgers, and we do have, whether they are now considered to be native, I'm not sure, or they're returned, but eagle owls will kill hedgehogs. In fact, in my latest book, there's a rather fantastic picture of an eagle owl carrying a hedgehog, which is just a moment of like thinking, this is astounding. There was a Dutch photographer I met, and he had found remains of a hedgehog and then he set up his hide, and
oh my goodness.
Yeah. So eagle owls' talons are longer than hedgehog spines. It's the same with badgers. Badger claws are longer than hedgehog spines, so that's why they can cope. So.
Wow. Okay. Gosh, we'll watch out for those then.
Well,
yes.
I'm excited if there were eagle owls, to be honest.
Yeah, I know. We'd be too amazed to see one. Nicola has said, thank you, Hugh, for a brilliant talk. And just sort of leading on to sort of segueing through, what is the natural life expectancy of a hedgehog?
So most hedgehogs don't reach their first birthday.
Oh,
so,
just get the my tissues out again.
Hibernation's tough. Being a young hedgehog is tough. So most hedgehogs don't reach their first birthday. Pat Morris did sampling of roadkill hedgehogs and he found that you can basically, like growth rings in a tree, if you section the lower jaw of a dead hedgehog, and you can count the growth rings, because when they go into hibernation, they stop growing. So you have a period of time where they don't. So he found that on the whole, a very old hedgehog was 7.
Wow.
Now, a Danish scientist called Sophie Lund Rasmussen, who's just moved to Oxford, she's rather lovely, and she did this with loads of hedgehogs in Denmark, and she'd got the road sweeping teams, the council road sweeping teams, when they came across hedgehogs, they put them in a bag for her and took them to a local freezer point that she'd got around the country. And so she ended up with hundreds of dead hedgehogs, but she sampled those and found hedgehogs there she thought were up to 11 years old. But
wow.
It may be that there is a possibility that longer, milder winters will have had an impact on the methodology of sampling and counting the rings, because it may be that some growing is happening at different moments during the year. We don't know, but yes, basically an old hedgehog is 7, I would say.
Gosh, yeah, okay. We'll just briefly go over this one because I think you've already sort of answered this one, Hugh, but Naomi wanted to know whether or not you thought dogs impact our hedgehog population, which you've already answered. She works for the Cheshire Wildlife Trust, and we found this to be an issue when trying to set up hedgehog highways. So I don't know if you've got any other comments for that.
Some dogs are a problem. But I mean, it very much is down to the dogs themselves. And the advice from the Hedgehog Society is that if you've got a dog that you know is going to go for hedgehogs, then, well, the only time it's going to be a problem is at night time, probably. So when it's letting the dog out for a last wee, then you let the dog bark once or twice before you let it out. So hedgehogs know they're coming. If they then start mithering away at something at the back of the garden, then go out there and see what they're up to and pull them away from the hedgehog. If they are some sort of terrier which is never going to stop, then the nocturnal pee time is going to be on a lead. So it's if you're concerned, then you go with the dog and you encourage the dog away from hedgehogs. But yes, I mean, up in Orkney, there was one black Labrador called Tarzan. And he was a great dog, great big black Labrador, and sort of bear of a dog. And the owner of Tarzan had said to me that Tarzan used to bring him hedgehogs. And so I was counting the hedgehogs up on this island. And so Tarzan would turn up with hedgehogs, and Tarzan would end up with a bleeding mouth, not from the hedgehogs being injured, but because his gums would get spiked by the spines. But Tarzan thought it was just the best game to find hedgehogs. And so I used him a couple of times to go out, just helping me survey for hedgehogs. And he only found male hedgehogs, interestingly, because they do smell more. But Tarzan had never hurt a hedgehog. Now then, a Japanese TV crew appeared on the island. And they were doing a piece about the hedgehogs up on North Ronaldsay. And they thought it was brilliant that this dog would go and find hedgehogs. So the Japanese TV crew went off, and Tarzan found a hedgehog. They brought the hedgehog back to have a close look at the cameras. They're chatting to camera, and Tarzan then bit the hedgehog's head off. In front of the Japanese TV crew. And I'm just thinking, if that was filmed, I don't know if you remember the Clive James thing, where he used to have weird TV from around the world. He always used to have a section on really strange Japanese TV programs. I'm imagining there is a similar outtakes program which shows this as well somewhere. So yes, some dogs will, But yeah, on the whole, dog owners will have an idea if their dogs are going to be like that.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Okay. Then we've had a couple of sort of comments really rather than questions. Elizabeth has said that their hedgehogs constantly poo in their box and in the food bowl. And then and Juliet asked this question a little bit earlier. It says, the hedgehog in our garden keeps pooing in its food bowl. We feed it bagged hedgehog food or meat cat biscuits. Plus there's a bowl of water. Is that normal? And so that's a couple of people who asked that question.
You see, I don't run a hedgehog rescue. I know many people who do run hedgehog rescues. Hedgehogs have not got good table manners. So basically, what will happen is, if there are more than one hedgehog around, the hedgehog that's there first, the bigger hedgehog, whatever, will often then, rather than feed from the side of the bowl, get into the bowl and start eating from in there, stopping the other hedgehog coming along. And the hedgehog will then just defecate, because why not? I don't think it's any particular marking or any particular trying to put the hedgehogs off. It's just, I'm in here, I'm eating, I need to go, but if I leave here, you'll start eating, so I'll just carry on.
There you go. Yes. Yeah. It makes perfect sense, because they can is the answer to that. Yes. Then there's a couple of nice comments from Christine. I think she's said, I love the idea of the corn circle dementia. I think that, yes, that's definitely one of the highlights.
You're supposed to come away wanting to do hedgehog conservation. Sorry.
I know, it's hilarious. She has also I love it. She also had a hedgehog visitor called Eric. I love it. Names for them. But she hasn't seen him for a little while, sadly. But she would like to know what would be, and you've kind of already answered this as well, but we'll just to reiterate it, the best kind of hedgehog house to keep them safe. So I know you mentioned the big sort of.
Well, you can buy the hedgehog house, but actually I was getting into trouble with this, because you can buy hedgehog houses through the British Hedgehog Preservation Society website, but if you've got a wildlife friendly garden, you don't need a hedgehog house. If you've got a log pile, if you've got a bramble patch, if you don't sweep up all your leaves and send them off to be incinerated or composted, but you make a copper leaf pile at the bottom of your garden, if you leave a bit of your garden to go wild, there should be. Think of the name of the hedgehog. They hog the hedges. If you have got habitat which looks like the base of a really good, rich, biodiverse hedge, then they will make a home there. You can build a hedgehog house. You can buy a hedgehog house, or you can simply lean a plank against a wall and provide lots of vegetation for them to pull in there. They need a structure in which to pull dry leaves, and then they rotate around, and that creates a laminate structure of layers of different leaves, and it will help do that. But yes, if you've got a more tidy garden, then the hedgehog houses are a good solution to that.
Yes, but I'm very glad that you mentioned about the no mow May and having more of a wildlife garden, and and leaving areas of your garden to be a little bit more untidy, so to speak. That's your best way of encouraging wildlife in. So
so that encourages the insects which come in, which then lay the eggs, which become the grubs that the hedgehogs eat. All of this is part of the cycle of life.
Yes, exactly. I've got a very funny comment from Jenny, which sort of refers back to with the lady who had the problem with the fox in her garden. So Jenny said, we once got a video of a fox coming in our garden and attempting to eat a tasty snack that was on the ground by the hedgehog bowl. It soon spat it out, realizing it was hedgehog poo. So that's hilarious. Can you imagine? That should be on, some sent into some video thing, shouldn't it? Be a £10 prize, I'm sure. Thank you, Jenny, for sharing that. Excellent. Naomi's got a very technical question for you, Hugh. She said, what is the drill bit you use to make the hole in the wall? Have you got any recommendations?
It's 127mm core, diamond tipped core drill bit.
Ooh, fancy.
So you need a powerful motor to drive it, and I borrowed that drill, and it's a big drill which comes with a big box which does something to the electricity from the mains. I'm really not very good at this side of things. So it's not just a simple thing that you've used to put your shelves up with. It's a much more powerful thing than that. I've used, you can get these little things with like a little saw which goes back and forward to do wooden bases. The problem with the core bit is if you're going in through gravel boards, some gravel boards, concrete gravel boards are metal reinforced, and that just would be messy.
Okay.
I don't know how you tell, to be honest. So it's with those, I've seen people, what they do is they simply remove the gravel board and replace it with one with a hole already cut in it.
Probably it's seek the advice of somebody who knows how to do it properly. Maybe
ask questions on the Facebook group as well, on the Hedgehog House.
Oh, of course, yeah. I put that on the chat as well. Right, there's a couple more comments that have come through the chat, but I'll just say that if we're coming up to 8:20, so if you do have any other questions for Hugh, we will be finishing in the next sort of 5 minutes or so. So if you do have any other questions, then pop them in the chat. But we've had
at Hedgehog Hugh is my social media thing on most things, and so drop me a question through there later if you find you've suddenly remembered something.
Okay, perfect, and then we can always send them on to you, Hugh, as well. So we've had some other nice little comments from Louise saying fantastic talk, so thank you very much. And then another one from Charlotte saying I have several hedgehogs visiting, trying to spread the word in my village. Well done, Charlotte. We need to have some hedgehog stickers, don't we? She's definitely a lady we want on our side. Wrote an article to link with Hedgehog Awareness Week in our monthly newsletter, and we have a village phone box that is used to advertise and promote issues. So I've contacted to the person who has done this, and they've done a lovely display for all those people who can pass by it. My goodness.
That's good.
Yes, I think there should be a definite Hedgehog Award coming to Charlotte. Well done, you. Yes, and Amanda said thank you very much for the answers. And like we said, Jenny has also said thank you very much for answering the question. I actually created a feeding station from an old plastic box today, which we've put out for the first time this evening. Hoping it works. We'll keep a watch on the wildlife camera. Thank you for a great talk, me and my 11-year-old who shouts at the videos of the evil magpie.
Was I rude?
Loved it.
Did I say anything rude?
No,
good.
You were very good.
Because I can't see the audience, sometimes you could end up
getting yourself in a pickle. No, I'd have bleeped you very loudly if you had, but no, you didn't. So so I think that's the end of our. Last one just popped in. Thank you. This is from Beth. Thank you for the talk. Love hedgehogs, and I'm a garden writer. I try and make sure my readers know how to help hedgehogs. So absolutely brilliant. So Hugh, once again, thank you so much for such an entertaining presentation this evening. It was absolutely brilliant. It's always lovely to hear the different stories, and your humor with it was spot on. So thank you very much indeed.
Well, thank you all very much for inviting me. That was great fun. And
yes.
And now you can go and get the last 40 minutes of Spring Watch.
Yes, exactly. And yes, thank you very much to everybody who has attended this evening. We very, very much appreciate your support. I know a lot of you are members of the Wildlife Trust, and we do very much appreciate you supporting us. Continued support, and I hope that you've enjoyed this evening's presentation. We do have a few more coming up. We've got, we're starting with the 30 Days Wild programme, starting on the 1st of June, about getting out there and doing something wild every day in June, and that's also linked in, sort of following on from our No Mow May, which Hugh mentioned as well, even though I didn't prompt him, so well done, Hugh. But there is a No Mow May coffee morning on the, just checking my dates, the 10th of June. So if you haven't already signed up for that, then please do. And there's some wildflowers and orchids coffee morning coming up, and then some earthworms lectures, another returning back to the San Martins with James Hurd that we did, that has happened before. So lots and lots on the schedule coming up, so please do sign up for those, and we'll hopefully see you all then. So thank you very much for coming. Good evening, and take care, everybody.
Bye now.